Hello everyone, this is a mythical dragon and a long lost series has now finally returned to your screens. That is right, Unique History is back and I am going to continue where I left off back earlier in the year with sort of French and prominent figures of history. And we're going to do Maximilien Robespierre because if you are a fan, maybe not a fan is the right word, but if you are fascinated by the French Revolution like I was in school, this person is sort of near and dear to the heart of it all, isn't he? If you don't know what I mean, then sit back, relax, and let's turn our chapter to Maximilien Robespierre back in the French Revolution. The article I have found is by alphahistory.com, and they have amazing documents and resources for more history if that is your thing and your interest. So I'll make sure to link this article and the website down below for those that are curious about history like myself. Now the title of this is just really nice. It is a proper biography of Maximilien Robespierre, so that's the title of it. And we're going to learn a lot about who he is and what he did, basically, during the French Revolution's radical and volatile period. So I'll begin by, again, reading this out loud to you and reacting to it as we go through it and filling in any blanks that I see fit. And we'll enjoy it. Just enjoy this, because it's quite a journey. And if there are French words in here that I pronounce incorrectly, I am so sorry. I don't speak French. I am more Spanish-based than French-based, even though I'm Canadian. So if I say anything wrong, I apologize wholeheartedly to my French-speaking friends out there. Let's begin. Maximilien François de Robespierre was born in 1758 and died in 1794. He was the most significant leader of the French Revolution's radical period. He has divided historians and modern thinkers, just as he divided opinion in his own time. Some consider Robespierre the Revolution's greatest dictator, the arch-sanguinocrat. Sanguinocrat, probably. Oh, that's a hard one to say, sanguinocrat. The driving force behind the Committee of Public Safety and the Reign of Terror. Others have taken a more nuanced and measured view, believing his power and influence have been exaggerated and misrepresented. Whatever the extent of his power, Robespierre is a fascinating figure. Obsessed with virtue and incorruptibility, disinterested in martial gain and distractions, Robespierre was a man entirely dedicated to the revolution. Now we're going to go through his background. Robespierre was born in Arras, about 115 miles or 180 kilometers north of Paris in 1758. His mother died when Robespierre was an infant, and his father abandoned the family shortly after, leaving Robespierre and his siblings to be raised by their grandparents. He attended a local school and proved an exceptional student, winning a scholarship to Paris. There, he shared classes with Camille Desmoulins, who for much of the revolution was a political ally. As a 16-year-old, Robespierre was chosen to deliver a Latin eulogy to the newly crowned Louis XVI, but the king famously snubbed the young student, remaining in his carriage out of the rain, then leaving early. So there's some hints here of some early, what would we call it? Some early resentments, maybe, to French life and the way it stood, and especially to the aristocracy of the King Louis and the royal family. I think that's fair enough. Being snubbed from the ceremony, and then he just stayed in his carriage and left early. Oof. By the early 1780s, Robespierre had graduated with a law degree and returned to Arras, where he worked as a defense lawyer. He became one of the region's best advocates, taking on and winning some high-profile cases and frequently working pro bono, for the public good, or for free, basically, on behalf of those who could not pay. So, it's not like, despite being snubbed and some of this kind of tough living experiences, basically. Parents, gone, lived with grandparents, but was a really excellent student, graduated, became a good lawyer, and someone who seemed to really care for the people. That doesn't sound like someone who would be at the head of such a big, huge revolutionary force like the Reign of Terror, does it? Let's see how he got to that point, shall we? The next section in this article is called At the Estates General. Robespierre's political life began in 1789 when he was elected to represent the Third Estate of Artois at the Estate General. I should really work on that French there. So he was elected to represent the Third Estate of Artois at the Estate General. Radical in his views, he was one of the first to join the Breton Club, a forerunner to the Jacobin Club, and later became the National Assembly. Robespierre's influence in the National Constituent Assembly was overshadowed by the radical power of men like Honore Mirabeau and Jean-Sylvain Bailly. He was more effective behind the scenes, however, and came to exert considerable influence in the Jacobin Club. Robespierre did not sit in the Legislative Assembly. He firmly raised the self-denying ordinance that prevented this, but was elected to the National Convention in September 1792. So he did a lot of behind-the-scenes work, it looks like, kind of snubbed the Legislative Assembly, never was actually part of that new government or that new governance, basically, but worked hard in the Jacobin Club instead, and doing things behind the scenes with his radical views. So some kind of breeding ground for his platform and what became to be the Reign of Terror and a huge part of the French Revolution. This part here is now we're going to explore his radical views and popularity. Robespierre was an avid believer in republicanism, democracy, equality, and the ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In his first months in the convention, Robespierre expressed his opposition to slavery in the French colonies, to a declaration of revolutionary war in Europe, to the use of capital punishment and the excessive use of violence. But, like the revolution itself, his views would change and radicalize with time. So originally, these things are all fair enough to believe in and kind of controversial, though, at the time to believe in these things, because slavery was still at the forefront for a lot of colonies, especially here in North America and in other parts of the world. So he opposed that, and which would be a big red flag to anyone in power who is actually in charge of these things. And he also said that having revolutionary war in Europe was not good, or that we should have it to kind of make change. Capital punishment and excessive use of violence as well. He was opposed to all of these things. But as the last line of that paragraph says here, his views would change and radicalize with time. Maybe just being opposed to these things was not enough for change. Maybe he decided that there were other things that he needed to do to prove that change was needed. Bum bum bum. Let's see. Let's continue on, shall we? Robespierre's profile and influence increased during the autumn of 1792. His policies and speeches became popular with the sans-culottes of Paris, who admired Robespierre's democratic values and his regular assertions that the revolution belonged to the people, not the politicians. So, of course, during this time, if people are upset and angry and frustrated with politicians, then hearing a speech like that from Robespierre saying, no, you guys are the ones that should take back control, that would be very appealing if you were angry with your own government and angry with how things have gone in your life. So he was able to kind of attract that popularity, that attention, that force that he needed. Then, Robespierre's opponents blamed him for igniting the September massacres. The accusation was baseless, though he would later justify the massacres as a legitimate revolutionary action. Within the convention, Robespierre became a prolific leader of the Montagnard faction. His speeches, like much of his political career, divided opinion. Robespierre was undoubtedly eloquent, and his speeches were rigorously prepared, but they did not please everyone. He is too verbose and does not know when to stop, one observer noted. Wow, that observer sounds like a Toastmaster. To make that joke real quick in here, but he was very eloquent, and his speeches were rigorously prepared, which meant that he had memorized them. He knew when to emphasize key words, show emotion where. He was that prepared when it came to his speeches, because he knew every speech he gave was probably important. And yeah, I mean, that's the way to go with life, right? Maybe not to be that prepared, but at least have some key marks in your speech or your notes that you bring with you to a speech to know when to emphasize and how to emphasize it. Would be some smart advice. Look at that, guys. We're learning how to public communicate from Robespierre. Maybe don't listen to this advice. Maybe don't. Maybe just stop here. Just kidding. Let's continue onwards, though. So, eloquent speaker, able to appeal to the masses, and divided opinions. Some people really liked his flattery and his eloquence. Others thought he was just too verbose and he doesn't know when to shut up. Fair enough. Fair enough. But Robespierre himself was cold, humorless, single-minded, and difficult to like. He had few friends and never married, despite constant offers from women he did not know. The historian Thomas Carlyle called him the sea-green incorruptible. Georges Danton's coarse view of Robespierre was that he can't fuck and money scares the hide off of him. Great. What a man. What a man we're learning about here. Very politically minded, single-minded, very focused, driven individual, but cold. What didn't have an ounce of humor in him, no friends, never married, refused all the offers he received to get married. And Georges Danton, he had a very coarse view. I think that's a polite way to say it, that he can't fuck and money scares the hide off him. Lovely. Very eloquent there, Georges Danton. Maybe you did not learn from Robespierre. Carrying on. Disposing of the Girondins? Girondin? We'll go with Girondin. Why not? We'll pretend I'm French. Disposing of the Girondin. Robespierre spent the first half of 1793 plotting against the Girondins, whose orators still dominated the National Convention. In the spring of 1793, Robespierre took this fight to the Jacobin Club, where he urged the people to take action against Jacques Brissac and his followers. The incitement paid off on June 2nd when an uprising of the National Guard and the Sans-Culottes forced the expulsion of 29 Girondin deputies from the convention. Though Robespierre had played an important role in orchestrating this, he later claimed it as an expression of the popular will. So he definitely played a role in it. He went to the Jacobin Club to receive help to do this, to kind of get rid of these people, the 29 deputies. But then he explained it as a way that, no, it's not only I that wanted it, it was of popular will, that more than just himself wanted it, other people wanted to do this too. So he was just a representative, the one to go speak on the popular will's behalf. What a clever man. With his Girondinist opposition gone, Robespierre's influence began to increase. In late July 1793, he gained election to the Committee of Public Safety and became the committee's spokesman on the floor of the convention. This is where uncertainty about Robespierre's power begins. While undoubtedly an influential figure on the Committee of Public Safety, it is unlikely he dominated the committee as is often assumed. So he was there, he was a speaker, he had the influence there, but it looks like a lot of historians, and this is where some controversy comes in regards to Robespierre, some believe that he was actually leading the entire CPS, the Committee of Public Safety. Others believe he was just an influential force within the committee itself, working with the committee to do the acts in the Reign of Terror. So fair enough. We got some split views here, but we're going to keep reading and see what you think. Maybe you can come up with your own conclusions to this matter. That's why I like history. We see a lot of that's why I like articles like this that point out where the differences are in history. Because then for ourselves, as we read through this and we see what this historical figure has done, we can come to our own conclusions of what this figure really meant to history. In a good way, a bad way, or maybe not as bad as we first thought way. So let's continue then. Robespierre's ideas, actions, and leadership played a critical role in bringing on the Reign of Terror, seeking to extend their control over the revolution, and under pressure from the Parisian sans-culottes, Robespierre and his colleagues on the CPS made terror the order of the day. What a phrase. He made terror the order of the day. If you think about that, if you said that every single day, that meant terror had to occur and had to happen every single day. And this was from the Committee of Public Safety, saying that terror is needed. A committee that's dedicated to public safety saying that. Whew. That phrase just gave me chills. Terror, the order of the day. Oh man, crazy. So after they made this terror the order of the day, or the order of terror basically, together, Robespierre and the CPS, they engineered the Law of Suspects in September 1793, which provided a legal basis for the terror that they ordered, the Decree on Emergency Government, as well. Became a part of this in October 1793. So a month later, they created this Decree on Emergency Government, which suspended the Constitution and individual rights. AKA, really laying on the layer there, so you got rid of everybody's individual rights and dropped and suspended the Constitution that is built to protect people. They were able to suspend it based on this Decree on Emergency Government. The next part here, and the Law of Frimaire in December 1793, which further centralized government power in the hands of the CPS. No longer the Legislative Assembly, no longer all the other organizations that were out there, and now became under control and gave control to the Committee of Public Safety entirely and centralized to them. Whew. Those three things within just a few months. So September, October, December. Law of Suspects, Decree on Emergency Government, and the Law of Frimaire created this environment in France at the time, or at least in Paris for sure, where they could do these kinds of things. Wild. Wild, wild, wild. Robespierre justified these measures with a number of speeches in late 1793 and early 1794. He equated revolutionary terror with virtue because it cleansed and secured the nation. So in other words, he justified these actions and these things coming into place for France because he equated revolutionary terror with virtue, in the sense that we needed to do these things for our country so that it can be cleansed and be secured as a nation. So again, using language that would be appealing to anyone who is upset and angry with how things have been. If you are really, really angry at your government, if you heard people speaking in these terms, that would be very appealing. You would get support. I'm not saying go out and do this kind of thing nowadays, because obviously there's so many rules and regulations on how you deliver messages and speeches, especially online. But I'm saying back in this time period, hearing that in a world where everybody was questioning everything because of the Renaissance, new technology, new art forms, all this new stuff that's being created and born, began the erasure of the importance of the church, and then thus became a focus is to now like, oh, we should erase the influence of the aristocracy as well. So hearing all these things, of course, people have been in such full of doubt and like concern and excitement and anger, because now they have the ability to question what's been going on, and thus leads to big things like this, like revolutions and terror as well. But we have the rapid fall now, so the fall of Robespierre here, because again, if you remember when he died, his death was in, I have to go all the way to the top here, sorry, was in 1794. So he did all of these radical acts in 1793, the end of 1793, and then in 1794 he was rallying it all together, making it work, making it happen, but he dies in this year, and just a year later. So let's see what caused his fall. So, I just had to pause for a moment because I read the first sentence. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Robespierre could be as ruthless as he was single-minded. Put those two things together, single-minded, ruthless. That's a dangerous combination. He used the CPS and the organs of the terror to eradicate many of his rivals, most notably George Stanton, in April 1794. On his way to the guillotine, Danton predicted that Robespierre would soon be following him, and so it proved to be true. Robespierre's fall from grace was the product of several miscalculations. By mid-1794, Robespierre was unpopular both with his fellow deputies and many Parisians. A fact suggested several assassination plots against him. Robespierre's attempt to create an artificial religion, the cult of the Supreme Being, with himself at the helm, invited accusations of megalomania. Yup, that's very, very self-centered, egotistical, narcissistic, of just being the head of the cult of the Supreme Being, and created his own artificial religion, that he was the center of it all. My God, that's a whole something there. Okay, Robespierre, Maximilien, dude, you all right there? That all the power that you accomplished and achieved in 1793 went to your head? I think so. I think that's pretty clear here. It's the problem with obtaining power is what you do with it and how much you let it get to your head. So finally, the passing of the law of 22 Prairial, which expanded and escalated the terror, drove many Robespierre's politicians into a panic. So this another law came into being where it can expand and escalated the terror. So on the street, beheadings, think about that, guillotines being brought to town squares, and rows upon people being executed for treason and other things like that. That was what was going on in this time period. And this law of 22 Prairial expanded it further, meant it could happen more regularly and more frequently and in a farther distance outside of Paris. A loose coalition began plotting to purge Robespierre before he could purge them. So these politicians went into hiding, basically in a panic, because they knew they would be up next. They are the focus of the anger, they're the focus of the Robespierre's anger, with everybody's anger, right? Because again, Robespierre is able to appeal to the masses that this country isn't what it's supposed to be. We should be a democracy. We should not be an aristocracy. We should not be under a monarch rule. All these radical beliefs, and people started to believe him because of the way he spoke. And now we see Robespierre here, and again, 1794, roughly, 1793, 1794, getting rid of those influences, and people would be terrified, but also celebrated it because of his influence. So these politicians, when this law became enacted, went into hiding, and then a loose coalition began plotting to purge Robespierre before he could purge them. So it became like within the city of Paris itself, like this kind of politician on politician chase. It was Robespierre after those that went against him, and then those that went against him against Robespierre. So it's quite a wild chicken chase, I guess, through the streets of Paris at that point. The end came on July 27th in 1794 when Robespierre and his followers were cornered in the Hôtel de Ville. Shot through the jaw, Robespierre was hauled away and guillotined the next day. His death signaled a rapid and profound transformation in the revolution, the end of the Reign of Terror, and the beginning of the Thermidorian reaction. So this loose coalition managed to come together in a large enough group to corner these people, shot Robespierre through the jaw. Probably that's a really good symbol of, we don't want to hear from you anymore. Shot through the jaw, can't speak, right? And then guillotine the next day. And so with that big group, like Robespierre and a bunch of his followers together, all executed, it signaled that the revolution needed a turn. It was changing. The terror would now stop. And we had this Thermidorian reaction. So we have a historian's view, like historian that the website and the author of this article actually interviewed a historian, and this is what Marissa Linton has to say about Robespierre. Robespierre's politics have often been seen as synonymous with the revolution itself. He encapsulated what was best and worst about the revolution. He was a tireless advocate for liberty and equality, yet, to defend these principles, he was prepared to adopt the terror. Nevertheless, he was only one man amongst many, and we may ask why it is that revolutionary ideology as a whole has so often been identified with just this one individual. I like that. I do like this view. It is questioning a lot of how we view the world. When it comes to big movements out there, we often highlight one person who is in charge of it all, and that might be true. Maybe it is the one person who went and gathered a bunch of people together. Like Robespierre obviously went out and gathered followers, never any friends nor lovers, but he had followers and he brought them all together. But was it really just him in charge of so much? Was it really just his fault for what had happened? So that's why I like her view right here, is because it is questioning that a little bit. While he definitely was outspoken, was out there, was absolutely advocating for all of these terrible things that happened in 1793 and 94, it wasn't just him. And we have to come to think about, how is it so easy to put him on the pedestal? Why is it so easy to put him as the face of the French Revolution? We could probably see why through the article, with like being part of the CPS, the Committee of Public Safety, for probably advocating and agreeing to these laws and things that were enacted to let the terror happen. Like, absolutely, he was definitely part of that. But it must be because they have found enough evidence of his speeches, his scripts, his writings, his beliefs, like enough evidence of that was there, more so than probably anybody else during the revolution, that led for him to be that face of the revolution. So that's why history is so unique to me, is because, and unique history, is because even though it clearly was a whole group of people coming together to enact this terror, there must have just been more evidence of Robespierre and his name on documents, on speeches, on what he did and where he was at, that there's enough of him preserved in life and in history that it was easy to see that maybe it was mainly him doing everything. But that we need to question that. So that's why I like what Marissa Linton says. We need to question that a little bit, and maybe question how we share history. Maybe we need to look at just the whole groups and try to find all the individuals part of these committees and really showcase that they were the ones in charge of everything and Robespierre was part of that. We just need to change how we represent history instead of putting just a single face to a lot of things, without diminishing their influence, of course. Maybe adding more to the narrative and bringing more evidence of others that were part of it. That's what I think. Or at least maybe that's what she's hinting to. I'll leave it to you guys to see what you think. So let's go through here. I like this article because it brings down the top 5 key points that we've learned about Robespierre in this article and in this episode. So key point number 1. Maximilien Robespierre was the most significant revolutionary leader of the radical period from 1792 to 1794, a critical figure in the Committee of Public Safety and an architect of the Reign of Terror. Number 2. Raised by his grandparents, Robespierre was an outstanding student, once famously snubbed by King Louis XVI. He obtained a law degree and returned to his native city of Arras, where he was excelled as a lawyer. Number 3. Robespierre represented the Third Estate at the États Généraux, where he proved an important though not prominent figure. He was also active in the Breton and Jacobin clubs. Robespierre's rise to, this is number 4, key point number 4, Robespierre's rise to national fame began during his time in the National Convention. He became a significant Montagnard leader and was admired by the sans-culottes for his democratic values. And key point number 5. Robespierre was a key figure in the CPS, the Committee of Public Safety. His power increased with the passing of laws that centralized power and unfurled the Reign of Terror. Robespierre's championing of the cult of the Supreme Being, as well as his personal demeanor and arrogance, led to his growing unpopularity. He was eventually overthrown and guillotined in July 1794. What I like about this key point summary here at the end is that it really hints at some of the main causes or forces that drove Robespierre to be who he became and how it led to his fall. So example there, being snubbed by King Louis XVI to do a proper eulogy at his ceremony, at his crowning, because of course it's a sad thing and a happy thing, right? King Louis the 16th, his father passed away, so now he's king. There's those two things. He got snubbed by an aristocratic figure. Boom. Maybe there's the first early indication of him not liking the government system and the government structure and the aristocratic government structure. That would be the first personal reason why he may not like the royal family. And he was an excellent student and obtained a law degree. So then he knew how at least the judicial system worked. And he was a big advocate, a part of that, and worked really hard to be an amazing lawyer. Because then he understood that branch of government, the judicial branch, at least. So there's that. From key point number 2, that's what I took from that. Then, as he's here, he actually got elected into the Third Estate, and so this was another kind of representation, government representation, and he became very active in both Breton and Jacobin clubs, which were both clubs that were advocates of not enjoying the aristocratic governments anymore and how things were being managed. This was again the era of Marie Antoinette's King Louis XVI, where the nobles and the bourgeoisie, high-class members of society were just spending money, leaving everybody else poor, hungry, and angry. Then he became a little bit more prominent when he actually became part of the National Convention, and he became a significant leader and was admired by the sans-culottes, who were already pretty violent in nature and revolutionary in nature as well. And so they became attached to Robespierre because they shared the same belief of having democracy over aristocracy in government. And then the rest is him becoming a prominent figure in the CPS, unleashing those laws that led to the Reign of Terror, and having that freedom to wipe out or cleanse the country of prominent figures who were still advocates of the current system and the status quo. And then it led to his demise there, the last point number 5, where he started to create that cult of the supreme being the face of that, and having a really huge ego and personal demeanor and arrogance, all those nasty things no one likes. And that eventually made enough people angry to chase him down, hunt him down, and guillotine him in July 1794. Whew. What a man. What a man. And there's like a lot of really interesting other articles and sources that are at the bottom of this article, that if you want to know more about French Revolution. And also in the article itself, if I've brought up things that you have no idea what they are, like the Thermidorian reaction, Law of 22 Prairial, there are some things here that you can click on and read more about if you so desire. So please, again, check the description below if you want to do a deep dive further on this crazy leader of the Reign of Terror, or at least one of the biggest influential parts of the Reign of Terror. The article is down below in the description for your perusal, and I'll leave it up to you guys on what you think. Was it solely Robespierre's fault? Or was he the one that should be in fault for the Reign of Terror and how much damage had been done? Or do you think there's more to it that we may or may never know? Let me know what you think below in the comments. Thank you for listening. I'm so happy to bring this back bi-weekly, and I can't wait for the next one, because we're going to look at sort of the time period post-French Revolution with one that most people know in history, Napoleon Bonaparte. So we're going to look at Napoleon next in 2 weeks from now. Looking forward to it. Subscribe so you have those notifications. There's that little bell icon. You can click on that too. And I look forward to sharing these fun, not so fun figures of history and unique history. Book is closed. Farewell, friends. Take care out there, and I'll see you in the next episode. Farewell.